It's a pleasure to be here on behalf of Dick and Ann and Gail. I can say how delighted we are to be here to talk about a ministry that's near and dear to us. Our plan for the evening is that each of us will speak 3 times. We'll have kind of one go around where we'll talk a bit about the basics of an Ignatian Retreat. We'll talk a little bit about Ignatius of Loyola, who he is and why he's important to us, what an Ignatian Retreat is and who it's for. We'll speak about the different kinds of Ignatian retreats and how you might make a decision about choosing which one is right for you. Then in the second go-around, we'll talk a little more deeply about the characteristics of a retreat itself, what you might expect on a retreat. We'll speak about the role of silence, about the meeting with the retreat director and what that's like, about the schedule of a day on the different kinds of retreats, the place of nature on a retreat. And then finally, each of us will speak a bit out of our experience. We'll answer the question, what can happen on Ignatian Retreat, out of our own experience of what in fact has happened, both in our experience as makers of a retreat, as retreatants, but also as directors. So let's get started. Several years ago, Father Dan Harrington, on the faculty of Boston College's School of Theology and Ministry, he published a book with a very straightforward title, Who is Jesus? Why is he important? Taking a cue from Dan, I'd like to open tonight's talk on presentation on Ignatian retreats by addressing first just who is Ignatius and why is he important? Some insights into Ignatian spirituality. When I watch a film version of a favorite novel, I'm often disappointed to see how they've cut or truncated or compressed some of my favorite scenes. Well, I realize that to give an overview of Ignatius' life in about 4 minutes, which is my goal, I'll be doing a lot of cutting and compressing of my own. And if you're plenty familiar with Ignatius, which many of you are, I only hope that you find it a fair job. So here we go. Ignatius was born at the close of the 15th century in the Basque region of northern Spain. As a young adult and as a soldier in the service of the Spanish king, you could say that Ignatius lived his life full throttle, setting his sights on honors and glory, the vanities of the world, in his own words. But all that changed in the flash of a cannon. In a battle against the French, a cannonball hit and badly smashed his legs. Ignatius was taken to his family home in the hamlet of Loyola for a convalescence that was going to last several months. Now, I have visited Loyola. It's located in a valley surrounded by these low, green hills, greener than anything I've ever seen, really. You would think of Ireland, not Spain. Well, in this tranquil setting, Ignatius did something that he hadn't done a lot of. He reflected on his life. Only 2 books were on hand in the house, a life of Christ and a life of the saints. And Ignatius read these books over and over. Stimulated by this reading, by his own memory and imagination, and having all the time in the world to use them, Ignatius came to a discovery. He was born for a purpose. There was a life that he was made for, and God, his maker, was calling him to live it. Ignatius didn't know exactly what this life was, but he wanted to find out. And so he set off on a pilgrimage that really would never end. Ignatius's first stops were the mountainside monastery at Montserrat and the town of Manresa nearby. He stayed at Manresa for nearly a year, making occasional visits to the monastery, whose Benedictine abbot taught Ignatius how to pray in ways that were new to him. These included quiet meditation, talking to Jesus, heart to heart, directly. Another method which Ignatius really took to and made his own was the contemplation of gospel scenes. He would imagine Jesus and all the people and activity of the scene as vividly as possible, even placing himself there in the action. He wanted to get that close to Jesus, to see for himself who Jesus is and what he's about. Ignatius spent months in prayer, even living in the seclusion of a cave for a time. His prayer was not always easy, as he learned to discern God's voice from all the other voices that vied for his attention. But by the end of this long retreat, he came to a profound realization that the God who called him deeply loved him. And Ignatius, in turn, fell in love with God. His one desire, to make a return of love, to serve God and God's people in whatever way God might lead him. So Ignatius set off again to follow God's lead. In the years ahead, he would seek God traveling to the Holy Land, returning to Spain for formal schooling, and eventually making his way to the University of Paris. Back during his days at Manresa, Ignatius had kept journals with notes and records of his prayer activity, his spiritual exercises. He understood these exercises as God's gift to be shared with others. And Ignatius did share them. From time to time, from place to place, he directed men and women of prayer activities in various kinds and length. In Paris, Ignatius met up with 5 kindred spirits, fellow students who befriended one another. Like Ignatius, each desired to grow closer to God, to live the life that he was born for. In time, Ignatius led each of them through the fullest version of his exercises, which took about 30 days to complete. Each friend, in his own way, experienced more deeply than ever God's love for him and grew fervent in the desire to make a return of that love. Eventually, these students, they discerned that God had brought them together to serve God together. They took vows, they pooled their distinct qualities and talents. They became the nucleus of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. And they continued to share Ignatius's exercises, his prayer exercises, with the men and women of their day. Ignatius and his exercises, they're a spiritual legacy that have been passed on through the years. They continue to nurture and to nourish men and women of our own generation. And in fact, there seems to be a resurgence of interest in them of late. An Ignatian retreat, it's any time spent in prayer with a director making use of one or another of Ignatius's exercises or adaptations of them. There's a lot more that can be said, and I'll turn it over to Dick, Gail, and Ann to do that.